Hi, in this video I really want to talk briefly about something that allows us, something called cell membranes, which allow us to do something pretty interesting in a cell. And that is to create a different environment on the inside of the cell. Sorry, let me get that different color. On the inside of the cell than on the outside of the cell. And cells do this with the cell membrane, which is essentially this part of the cell, like the barrier. And they do that by exploiting the chemical property called polarity. And this is where in some molecules there's a slight charge on one portion of the molecule and also on another portion there'll be the opposite charge. So for example, in water we have a negative charge near the oxygen. Other molecules are nonpolar and they will have basically a neutral charge along the entire molecule. So our cells exploit this by creating what are called phospholipids. Phospholipids are interesting because they have a polar portion that will sort of approximate as a sort of bead that has charge localized in one area. And then they'll have a non-polar portion. We'll make that one purple, which are these two tails that are lipids, so they're sort of fats. And because water is a polar molecule, and polar molecules like to spend time around other polar molecules, we'll get water associating, this is sort of like waves of water. I suppose I should draw a molecule associating with the polar head, and we'll get other lipids associating with the tail. And this allows us to form essentially what is a membrane, this portion right here. And let me clear this really quickly so we can start over. And the way it does that is by forming these membranes that, we do that by forming membranes. And the membrane will have all these sort of tails, or these phospholipids, where the tails are facing each other, and the heads are facing, some of them outside, like these ones, and some of them inside the cell. And so this way, with this particular arrangement, the heads over here, they'll be facing water, things that they like to face, and these will be facing other lipids, which are nonpolar, the things that they like to face. And then this structure will wrap all the way around the cell in a sort of three-dimensional pattern. So there will be a plane of membrane, and then it will wrap so that it wraps around the whole cell in 3 dimensions, sort of around all the organelles and sorts of things inside the cell. And what this does is it makes it difficult for certain molecules to pass through the cell easily. In other words, certain molecules will have to be transported into the cell on purpose. And that makes it so that the cell can dictate what is supposed to get in and not. And an important thing also to remember about this is that this assembly of phospholipids is not difficult for the cell to do, because the lipid portion already tends to associate with other lipids, and this phosphate portion already tends to associate with things like water and other polar molecules. And so in the right circumstances, these membranes will actually sort of fall into place. So it's not energetically very difficult for a cell to create them where it needs to. And this situation is very effective. So it's easy to make and very effective for a cell to use. So membranes are not just phospholipids. There will also be proteins, so these giant globs that will sort of sit in here. But The phospholipids are what make all of that possible. So when we talk about these proteins that sit inside the membranes or other things that are inside the membranes, it's important to recognize none of that could exist without the membranes.